Hmm.
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 Hello.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Evening all.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
What are we working on?
I'm rendering today. Lots and lots of little AI renders today.
Really? AI renders? It's like I don't even know you anymore, Trey.
I know. Tell me about it. I've just kind of got lost in the sauce of technology. It's actually it's a face swap followed by a render followed by a secondary face swap followed by an upscale and then conform to 29.7 for broadcast. So it's this big long list of like file transmogrifications that I need to perform today.
Do you do that locally, or did you send some of that off to a little worker bee floating in a cloud someplace?
It's all local because I'm doing a lot of it in DaVinci Resolve.
All right.
Like I'm doing the super scale, by the way. If you want to upscale any of your video renders, the DaVinci Resolve super scale tool is the best that I've
Wow.
found. Like it's better than Topaz.
I didn't even I mean, I got to, I'm always just like every time because I don't use DaVinci enough to actually be even comfortable with it. It's always just like, oh, wait, how do I do that again? But they keep throwing in new features, which is great.
Yeah, it's got really really good features. So yeah, I've been diving a lot more into it. So I've been getting into the nuances of fusion
Yeah.
and doing that stuff. And it's pretty darn powerful. And there's something really beautiful of like never having to leave the program, unlike if you're working in Premiere and then having to go to After Effects, and then having to do this and having to do that. Everything just exists in one program, which is super cool.
Yeah, amazing.
Hmm.
I
Okay,
remember
so
I remember video editing becoming so much more fun moving from Premiere to Resolve a couple of years ago. That was
Yeah,
mm,
it's delightful. Like it's a really great example of like user interface design and thinking of um, workflow first. Like this is a linear way that you address a workflow, and let's make the program conform to the user needs. And so yeah, I feel the same way. It feels uh, nice and professional when I open that program up.
but so what, you have a local MCP tying into DaVinci or
No, I'm just rendering video, and then
okay.
once the video's done, I just bring it into Resolve, just like I would any other video clip, and perform all the post processing uh,
All right.
things that I would normally do on any footage.
Hmm. Because I know I've been getting into MCP more this week, and they're starting to show up like local interactions to like affinity design, for example.
Mm,
Right, so you can actually use like Photoshop has scripting and whatever. You can actually use an MCP to script Photoshop automatically, just like you would with a browser or anything else. It's kind
I'd
of
love
nice.
to.
Haven't
I'd
tried
love
it,
to
but I
learn
read
more.
about it. So
I'd love to learn more about it. Maybe if you're doing some research, you should do a side project
yeah,
presentation.
I'm just klutzing my way through and
as we all are, as
but
we all are. Here's
yeah.
one thing, like I don't I want to find the way to communicate to people to not, I mean, look at us. Like this
Yeah,
isn't,
but
you're not pitching to someone, or find the way to say, to recognize that it's no reflection on you and your character if you're just kind of like clumsily working through something. That's the beauty of like the side project. And if I like came by and stopped by your studio and had a cigar and a brandy with you and we started talking, you'd be like, "Hey, wait, let me just show you this one thing. Let me just get your eyes on this." And that's
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah. No, no, no.
yeah, I mean, I know you get it because you've shared. I'm saying this for more of my purposes, so I have I'm because I'm trying to figure it out because someone signed up to share and then I had to cross their name off because they were like, "I'll be ready in the fall." I'm just like, "What the fuck are you talking about? The fall?
No.
Like what do you think this is?" It's like a matter of fact, if it's too done, it's like I'm almost less interested in it. It's more the formative stuff because then when people see things, people working on formative things that aren't all sealed up, perfectly branded with the spot on perfect 11-page deck, like that's for a different audience. This
Yeah,
is
but
this is the
then
pre.
it's always someone doing a deck which looks really nice here, and people go like, "Oh shit, no, I actually need to polish this before I need to have a conclusion." I mean, it's project, right? Defined goal with limited resources in a particular time frame, and I think that maybe if I just go like, "Yeah, okay, let me just go into VS Code and klutz about for 10 minutes and then talk about it," it's not that interesting to watch either. So it's a balance, right?
Talking about. I watch people live code all the time.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay. So okay, sorry,
I'm
that
not saying
might be me.
that might be an extreme, but I think, just seeing like, oh my God, here is like this is a mind at work. This is someone figuring something out. And that's the beautiful thing to see.
Hmm.
Like
Maybe I'll do that next week with N8N because that's been a little side project of mine.
okay,
Oh
so here we
man.
go. That's what I'm talking about.
There you go. I won't even prepare anything. I'll
But it's
literally
gotta
just
it's gotta be, so it's 10 minutes, right?
yep.
Because there was the guy he does like 90-minute things, and sometimes, he's just there, live stream starting. Here I am programming in Rust to build, but he's got a larger project. He's building a piece of hardware for his guitar, little guitar, stomp box of some description. But
I'm
he's
gonna do
also
like a hello
like
world.
coding the firmware using Rust. It's like that's kind of interesting. I didn't know you could do that. So let me watch this lunatic do it. He's not a lunatic. He's a cool guy. He'll talk about his training regimen while he's doing it. Ooh, today I was doing kettlebells and he's sitting there programming, and it's just background. But I think, but showing people that things are formative, I think is really it's both gratifying because you can like you sort of see yourself and also you see things happening. I get these emails from people. I mean, I love them. They're great. They're earnest, people. They're like, "Well, can you tell me I admire what you've done." I mean, I'm saying this with humility. Amazing. Like, can you give me any tips or advice about, as I'm launching my career, about how I can go about it? It's like, I'm nothing but tips. It's like there are 272 weeks of office hours where we're talking about what we do. There's a blog where we're talking about what we do. There's a podcast where we're talking about what we do. There are books. If there's some value in, what you're sensing enough to where you sent an email, like a nice long email, and you said, imagine it's like, because I was in the same position writing, and I don't know, what do I want to say because I want them to recognize me. It's like totally recognize you, but you gotta. I'm not going to repeat everything that I've said over the last 40 years. It's all there, including like, forums like this, to see how people are doing things and see people like you who are also wondering, what the fuck? What am I supposed to be doing? How does this work? So speaking of side projects, so there's two people who signed up aren't here. I pinged Jed because Jed and Brandon sent me a note. He said he's coming back from the doctor and he'll be here in a minute. Um, I think the side project that I always kind of keep in reserve that I would share in case it gets substantially rugged and no one showed up is I've been making these. I've been super into like trying to making these process books. So like, I mean, these are just like two of them. This is like a volume of like all my week notes from my company Amada. This is just like this is volume one. It's completely nuts, but it's I love it because it's got like oh look, it's got a little I made this little fold out section. You can't see it. This folds out. It's kind of, a little bit handmade, but also printed. It's
Is
got like
it like a
all my-
direct? Is it a like a one-off digital offset print?
yeah, it's one out. It's well, I made a few, but yeah, basically just like it's all digital. So it's just like I had started making these knowing that I wanted something like this. Just, like screenshots. The missus was calling me while I was coding. And but then I was like, what about all the Slack channels? So then I did some tooling. I wrote some programs to and figured out how to make a Slack bot. So shoved a Slack bot into the Slack, and then with the robot, it could pulled all the Slack data in this really, I mean, it's structured data, it's JSON, but it's really kind of terse. You're like, wait, what's going on? What are elements? But you could pull out the messages and then also get an index of all the users and the users' avatars. So it's basically just it's ridiculous. It's like all the messages over all
You-
these years and then all the files that were shared. So some of them are images, some of them are, different data formats. It doesn't matter. You're not going to actually like do anything with the data except reference it. Or I also try to do this thing with with movie files. So it'll make a grid of selected frames from the movie files. Let me see if I can find one. Um,
I don't know if knowing that my Slack messages would turn into a book at some point would encourage or discourage my participation. That's awesome.
yeah, well, it was such this was like, it's been like 10 years. And I, otherwise this stuff goes away. This is a bad version. So that was just a short video. So it's just like 4 frames from it. But then I also made this, uh, it didn't come out as good as I wanted to, but like for some of them, I turned into flip books. So if you flip through it, it'll show a crude animation, like a bad animated GIF of it. And then it's
Well, that's an interesting question. When you decided for this book, like how many years after the content was like indexed or the data was indexed, did you decide to do this? Like, is
it
this
was
recent
it was always
stuff or
it,
is it
it
a
was
decade ago?
no, no, it's over it's from I started the company at the end of 2014. And for example, the last message in this one was just from June 19th, 2025.
Oh, interesting.
So it's over many, many years. But it was an important project to me. It was my company that I sold. So it's like I want that, some recollection of it. But it's got so but the thing I wanted to do with it was also talk about the value of process over just the kind of final outcome, like being mindful that you're actually doing something. And the goal, you might think the goal is just to kind of get the thing done, but the goal might be like, oh my God, I'm actually doing something. Like something is coming from nothing. And I think we can be disconnected from that in a way. I get it but it was more like a sort of like wondering myself, like why am I so attentive to the doing of things while I'm doing it? To the point of like I'm doing screenshots while I'm coding. Like there was an instinct to do it. And it was more like I want to be able to look back at this moment. I mean, I remember very consciously thinking that, like, let me just do a screenshot. And you sort of set up a very crude, I wouldn't even call it a workflow, but just knowing it's like, okay, I know that's somewhere. Maybe in a few years I'll remember where I saved it and where it lives. Or I'll do a screenshot and put it in a little markdown editor that I was using that, was also on my phone. So I could like add things into it. And that's where I would do sort of more diaristic entries, like this got fucked up today again, kind of thing, or this broke, and do a screenshot of it. Or um, even there was a lot of international travel. So just taking pictures of the Burger King at the bottom of the escalator at the Helsinki airport, which was the only restaurant open at 11:30 at night, which was when the nonstop from LA arrived in Helsinki. So I had something to, something not very good for you to eat on the end of that, so I could then go to sleep with a full belly to wake up the next morning to get the next leg of of the flight to go further, even further north. And like those experiences, like otherwise, like I could sort of ponder it, but I wouldn't, it wouldn't come back to me in the same way. Like, isn't that funny? Like the Burger King was only a restaurant open in like Helsinki airport. Like Burger King, I don't associate that with the Finns necessarily, but clearly my association of fast food in Finland is a little bit off.
Have you ever heard of commonplace books?
No, tell
S-
me.
Um, there's a really neat book called The Notebook: A History of Thinking on Paper, and it goes into the things that people have done with notebooks
Hmm.
and the kinds of things that people have written down and the kinds of like cognitive and behavioral benefits and advantages that certain people, for example, like um, 14th century Italian merchants having the practice of writing things down in a ledger when no one else was doing that shit meant that they just had this massive advantage. But I love what you're sort of describing is it's not a diary. It's not it's just it's a collection of the things that you saw and that you experienced, but it's not just your reactions to them, it's them as well. It's kind of like the same impulse that scrapbooking has, but hopefully kind of usefully deployed. I feel like the Apple iOS Journal app is an attempt to try to codify that, but I like what you do with it better.
Thank you, Randall. Yeah, the thing that I would always say when I was trying to justify it to people is like, well, I want something on the shelf. So when my nephews come by and they're like, yo, Unc, what were you working on? What was that whole deal? And I could just be like, rather than trying to conjure a story, I'd be like, oh, well, let's grab a couple of these books and let's talk it through. And then the other there's so many of these books, but the reason I'm mentioning is that there was a side project for the last, I don't know, it preoccupied me for the last few weeks of creating the tooling for that. So, like a repo that is that I just kind of call um, Slack to book, and another repo that I kind of built for that, which was to turn you could point it at a directory or directory hierarchy, and it would turn that into a book just by kind of being aware of file types that were suitable for bookifying or for creating a preview of, and then even ones that are not. Because I was like, if you can't, well, just do a hex dump. That's kind of cool. Then at least you know there was something there, even if you can't discern it. Or sometimes you can discern it because you look at like the header and you're like, oh, this is this kind of file. And then because the company was, uh, it was a, um, it made a sports computer. There are a lot of files that were in a particular format that was essentially suitable for representing on a map, like a course that was written. So figuring out how to turn that particular data format, which is incredibly terse, into a an overlay on a Mapbox grid. So you could have a little preview. It's like, oh yeah, that was that one day I did that one ride. Or there's that same ride again. There's that same ride again. Or when people who were part of the test team sent their rides, be like, oh look, the test team was all over the world. There's a guy in Singapore, there's a guy in Korea. So, it's just one of those things. But I think that the main thing is I'm trying to just work on a longer kind of post, I guess, on process and the importance of and documentation makes it sound like work, of like the joy of actually making something from nothing, and then the turning it into something tangible and physical as opposed to just kind of leaving it digital. Because I don't know where. I mean, at some point, just be like, I know there's stuff on a I've had, I guess, maybe probably two or three laptops. I don't know, something like that over the course of those 10 years. And it's like it's probably on that other laptop. And just the thought of like trying to boot it up or something, or like, wait, that was the old power cord. Where one of those? It just feels like it'd be so much nicer to just kind of look back on a shelf and see a book.
Julian, do you know the work? It's funny because you say work, and I keep thinking about the word permanence, but because to me, documentation is more like having like a place in the world, or like having permanence, or having like leaving a mark. And with mark making, there's this artist named Susan Collins. I think she's British, I believe. Do you know her work at all?
I don't think so. No, name's not super familiar.
If you Google her, type in British or London based Susan Collins, I think you have to type in PhD because that matters, to pull up her work. But my favorite piece of hers is this wooden step stool. I saw her work at University of Texas, or in Austin. They had a gallery showing of hers when I was there. And she does a lot of like inlay of mark making that would seem like inconsequential or sort of like mundane, but she does it with precious stone or precious metals. So like mother of pearl or gold or silver or whatnot. And so a lot of paint drip marks with mother of pearl on like this wooden step stool. But it's documenting a process of somebody's work, and this whole idea of like documenting work or documenting somebody's existence. And I've been thinking a lot about photos lately because I'm back in a house that has all these photos of my childhood. And I'm like, wow, they just abruptly stopped when the iPhone came out,
Hmm.
right? There's no more printing of photo. And my mother was really big on these photo albums. And there's just shelf after shelf of photo albums that were leather bound and embossed with the trip or the year or whatever. And then they just stopped. So there's this weird, I've been having this like desire to document and like leather bound everything I've ever done. And then it feels arrogant and like privileged to want to do that. But then I've been thinking about like, well, what is leather bounding? Like Randall, sorry, spatial computing, or like leather bounding, like the idea of a digital identity. Or how do you physically contain these things that are specifically digital? Like, do I write it down? Do I print out a photo from Pinterest, from a mood board, right? Like, I mean, we all think about this stuff all the time, but there's this weird, and then I've been talking to a lot of friends about dating apps lately, and this push against them to find permanence in their physical interaction. So I think what you're talking about is fascinating because it's not, I don't think of it as like work. I think of it as actually like finding a place and like proof of existence. There's something so human to it to me, you know?
Right.
There's a popular Swedish thing, or it became oh, sorry, Anushka, you were before me. I'll pass.
Oh, I mean, to continue with what the topic of discussion has been, I feel like I have a format of I try to merge physical and digital archiving to some degree in a way where I try to let's say use digital formats to document physical materials. Like I'll scan, for example, I will scan all the tickets of my trip, or I'll scan all the concert passes that I wore on my hand, and that becomes like a method of like still having in certain degree like a physical, like quite literally a physical copy of it, but in a digital format. So, like, you can switch things every once in a while. And I feel like in terms of documenting, I always use them all, like use objects as triggers to a certain memory, or like some object will always have something associated with it. And I make it a practice that I keep it all around myself. For example, if you could see my phone cover, it has a lot of things that are going on the phone cover. And if this is a mochi wrapper that like a friend gifted me when he was on a trip to Japan, this is like a sticker from an apple that I was eating and I broke my tooth eating it. So like everywhere I go, I have like I always have something to show, and I use that for like the literal object that was there during that memory as a form of documentation and archiving of that memory in order to talk about it. So
Okay, so in Sweden a couple of years ago, a thing became popular. I don't know if it originated here, but it became death cleaning, which is like when you're getting on in age and you have collected a whole bunch of stuff over your life, but you don't want to leave it a mess for your kids or whoever is taking care of the inheritance to have to, toss it and read it. So a couple of years before your expected passing, you start cleaning the stuff up, right? So what books do I keep? What trinkets should I throw away, give away, sell, whatever, burn? And while doing this, it also becomes a process of recollection, right? So, like Anushka said, right? So, what memories are tied to what things? Um, and it's uh, I always get like whenever I like clean the apartment, which isn't very often, but when I do, whenever I like straighten stuff out, I go like, okay, great. I tossed out like 2 bags of crap. I'm I'm one step closer to being okay with dying now because my mark on the world, my negative mark on the world, has diminished somehow. I've recreated the structure. I've erased the bad things that I've done. EA collected crud, um, and and I like the parallel to the death cleaning movement a couple of years ago, where people went, "Oh, I'm probably gonna die within 10 years. I don't need like 2 story spaces full of stuff." So let's go through it one by one. Throw away, sell, burn, gift. Don't know where I want to come with that, but reflection. I recommend the book, by the way, the one I posted in the chat, How High We Go in the Dark. It's brilliant, and it's exactly about like memories, who we are, what we do, and what we have, how that shapes us. It's fantastic.
I always love the conversations that this group has. Um, it's been anyway, it's been really interesting to learn about how everyone's like treating media. It's like it's very internal. Like why? Like, do you care about this media? Why do you care? It reminded me of a conversation I had with a couple of friends of mine a couple months ago. And we were just sitting around talking, having a beer, and with the conversation, it was long. It was like someone hypothesized that like uh I'll say this generation, our generation, I'm only 40, but I'm gonna group myself in with some of the old timers here, where it's like if you lived through the transition away from like print photos into digital media, you've lost like this generation has lost more media than any other generation combined because previously it was like too hard to create photos, right? Like there was a lot of effort involved, right? And so you were selective in what media you chose to create. And then all of a sudden, like every camera had like a 3 megapixel camera that was like super cool. And then, so we all started taking tons of photos, but it was like stored on device or it was stored on some cloud service that like didn't survive the transition. And so collectively, we just lost like so much media to just, in a box or service that went down. And I mean, now that we're on the other side, so there's Google and all these, and they'll never let you delete anything anymore. But it was just like a interesting thought that like that just so much of this kind of commonplace stuff was created and then just is gone. Uh, so anyway, this conversation made me think about that.
I have a I have a thought on the lost media. A bunch of years ago, I went to Paris and with my Nikon Coolpix 950 camera, and I shot thousands and thousands of photographs, and I realized that I didn't even look at them, and I feel like a lot of us feel the same way about what we shoot with our phones. My phone is just full of stuff. I took a picture of once upon a time, and I've never even really looked at ever again. So at that moment in time in the whatever late 90s or early 2000s, I decided instead I would pivot and go in the opposite direction. So I learned how to build cameras. So I started building pinhole cameras, which some of us may have done in like grade school, but I got really high end. Like I found a laser cutting company and I figured out the diameter of the pinhole and a sharp pinhole, unlike, let's say, using a gauged acupuncture needle. A sharp laser drilled pinhole will yield really, really nice results. So I started modifying Lomos and Holgas and building my own box cameras. And I bought a lot of dead stock. So dead stock Polaroid peel apart film. So I still had the instant gratification of shooting a photograph where I would do the pinhole shot, and then I'd have to wait a while for it to develop, and I could peel it apart and watch my photo, my Polaroid 4x5 appear. But each shot cost me between $5 and $20, depending on what dead stock I had. So it meant that if I'm spending $10 on a single shot, I took a lot of time to like set up the camera, make the calculations, do light readings like near and far. So now I had this like intimate experience with like a bridge where I tested it and I looked at it and I kind of imagined the exposure of like all the various bolts and struts and so on and so forth. And then the exposure would be somewhere between 45 seconds to sometimes minutes. And but yeah, so one shot would be an hour and a half, 2 hours in the making, and cost me $10 to do it. And I have every single one of these shots in a Rubbermaid container just in another room. And I've been meaning to pull these out and scan them all over again. And also, I like to romanticize the idea like the photons that bounced off of the subject matter are literally embedded in the emulsion of the film. Like there's something beautiful about like the direct relationship between the light that bounced off the subject are captured on the film, unlike, let's say, a CCD or something like that. So I've got them in there, like you can smell the photons. Amazing. Anyway, so I think that'll be what that I'm inspired to do, maybe a side project and spend 10 minutes talking about pinholes and what I've done and point anyone in the right direction if they want to do it themselves.
That's wild. That's super cool. This to Benjamin's point, this conversation is I love it. It's pretty wild. I was thinking about wayfinding through your own past as Anushka was talking, and then this idea of actually sighting yourself in a place when you were talking, Dre, about actually having to physicalize your future memory in order to capture the picture is really intriguing. And I'm thinking about living in I live in the South, so we put a lot of our memories and we hide a lot of our memories in our buildings. And then we build near pluperfect stories around what had happened but did not happen around so that we get lost in our own positioning ourselves in the space, if you will, so that our emotional landscape never quite fits the architectural landscape. It's as if each person is dropping a pinhole someplace and deciding this is the perfect shot for what this thing actually is. um, I was thinking about so like a bizarre side project that is finding me is going to these places and doing laughter yoga and taking a video or a picture of myself while the tourists are walking around pretending to be sad because they're at a site of terror and they know they're supposed to be sad, but they just want to collect the ticket and the picture and frame it up right. Um, and so I have these pretty funny test videos of me. I went to the last church that MLK gave a speech at, someone just burned it down. So I went and did 5 minutes of laughter there. I went to the Lorraine Motel, did 7 minutes there, and then I went to a hidden remnant of the slave marketplace that this church knows is there. They're trying to get an artwork put there, so I went to the spot and did a laughter thing there, and then just couldn't stop laughing. So then I walked around the whole thing and found other churches and stuff. But that idea of what's going to remain of that experience for me, but also the people who are walking by, like wondering, is this just someone who just flipped out? And then what changes in the frame with this laughter happening? So what happens to the wayfinding signs? Like, what do they mean now? It's I feel like Julian, you always bring the thunder with these crazy side things, like, and then how do you capture things like that, right? Because you can't capture how you feel when you're in these places anyway. So even if you had taken a bunch of pictures of it, which most people do, they have like 30, 45 pictures that they don't go back and look at. What did you actually feel? What are you actually memorializing, remembering in the grab?
Is that a question or is that just
It's a question. I mean, because this thing that Dre said about building, taking the time to build a way to not only see, but also remember, read with the hyphen member, and then record. Um, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, me too. That's why I'm trying to figure it out. Like, just to um as I'm kind of writing just a little a write up for it. But I will say, and then we'll go to Kemp, and then we'll go to Brandon, who popped in for his side project, is that so Mateus's remark and the whole, what was it called? Dead pooling? What is it? Great.
Death cleaning.
Death cleaning. I think so. There's definitely something existential associated with it because it's like if I have a physical thing on a shelf, I'm not saying that it'll last through the ages, but it just feels like there's a little sense of like relief. Like, okay, that was recorded, that's there, someone can point at it. It's got a certain, it's accessible in a different kind of way. But it's also like, many of you know that I have nephews who I love and admire, and they're just like, and Jackson just did a post for this startup that he's a part of, AI startup. He wants to be an entrepreneur. And when I was doing my company, had a there was a to me, and I guess generally speaking, it was like very dramatic slash traumatic moment in that business wise, as there always is. That's what they call a startup. Um, and I was talking to a dear friend of mine who was also one of my investors, and he's like, and he was more like Silicon Valley. He's like, dude, the streets are paved with these kinds of experiences. And I remember thinking, like, I'm not naive. Like, I get what's going on, and I can comprehend it at one level, but it was more, felt as a painful thing. So him saying that was reassuring, like, which I knew. It's not just you, it happens all the time. But also I remember very clearly in my head, actually I was talking to his um he sadly passed, but I was talking to his wife, we're very close, yesterday. And I said, Mike said this to me. And I said, in my head was, well, no one told me. That's what the phrase that popped in my head. No one told me. No one told me. Not that I didn't know, because I had heard of it before. Other friends had the same thing. They're like, yeah, it totally sucks. And I was like, why doesn't anyone say anything about this? I'm not saying as in a kind of way to sort of, shame the other party who did the fucked up thing. I'm just saying in a way it's like, where are those stories? Why aren't those stories out there? Again, not as like a tell-all or a shame kind of thing, but like if they were out there, then the experience is kind of, you can rehearse it in some kind of way, you can comprehend it, and then it's processed in a different way, or you prepare for it, in a more pragmatic way. Say, look, if you're thinking about doing this, this is, we need to paper this shit before you screw it, or whatever, all these kinds of, so part of me is like, I want to make these so I can give them very literally to my nephews and say like, hey, let's talk about this. Like, this, you might not become an entrepreneur. Well, I don't know. I'm not telling you what to do, but um, there are people who are going to act against your own best interests in the world. Don't be naive about it. Look at what can happen in the world. This is what happened to me. I'm telling you this because I want you to be prepared for the fact that there are fucked up people in the world who are not going to act in your own best interest. They're going to act in their own best interest. You were raised really well, and you were raised to be a giver, but people are going to take from you if you're not careful. And so, just having that kind of story for them, I think about that quite literally. There are two of the books that no one in the world will ever see except, me and my family and close friends, which are the diary, 2 volumes of notes going through, all the experiences, but in particular, the really hard ones that I wouldn't want to, share more publicly. But it's like, this is for you. You might not be able to make sense of it, but let me give you the top line summary. Life's beautiful, and it's also and also tough. And you're going through these experiences. I don't want you not to go through them, but I want you to recognize when you're going through them and it hurts, that you're living life. You're really living. So that's what I got to say about that. Kemp, maybe quickly, and then we can go to Brandon. I totally want to see. And then Jed's here, and I want to see just what's working out. He's got some cool stuff.
Julian, that comment or that story just cracks me up because in my own startup adventures, I feel like in my little hiatus from NFL, I've done my own personal work on getting loud with pushback against people being like, "Oh, I could have told you that," or "I should, you should have known that." And it's like I got so annoyed with feeling a lot of shame for whatever not working out, and then feeling like I should like hide from the world on it, and then people being like, "Oh yeah, like you should, like I knew all that," and I finally was just like, I remember the last conversation with one of my best friends. He was like, "Oh yeah, like I could have told you all those things wouldn't have worked out." And I was like, "Oh yeah, from your comfy desk at McKinsey in like wherever." It's like, "Oh yeah, like you really risked everything from that desk, right? Like making all that money." And he was just like, "Oh yeah, you're right. I actually haven't done any risk in my life." So it reminds me so much of when I came out and people being like, "Oh yeah, we knew all along." It's like, well, yeah, there's just so many parallels of people like always saying something like, "Oh, I could have told you that," but never having actually been in the arena to do the work. So I've been very much giving myself credit for having been in the arena, and pushing back very vocally on it now. That's just my side comment to that now. But I was going to comment on what Anna said was being partly half Southern from Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm not sure where you're from, but it cracks me up because I've been thinking a lot about the concept of soul with objects. And in Charleston, my mother's house was on the carriage tour. And the carriage tour is like this incredible marketing ploy of let's brand antebellum lifestyle to a bunch of tourists, which don't need to go into it for this call, but like it's not what they branded it as is not the accurate history of it. And it's fascinating because Charlestonians love to talk about the soul of objects and houses and buildings. And while there's so much history in these objects and buildings, I'm very fascinated, like both the good and the bad around that. So as I move more into looking at digital identity and how people create really liberated or empowered identities through sort of digital means, what sort of new connections of soul are they tapping into, but what part of the soul is maybe getting lost, or how can that get brought back? Because it's fascinating, especially with like objects of around food, right, where like there's a really like exchange of soul or like communal exchange there. The South seems to really have like a big narrative around that. So Anna, if you ever want to talk more about that, I would be curious. But that was sort of what I wanted to talk about because the South really has rebranded pretty magnificently a lot of things. That's it.
Thank you, Kemp. Yeah, the whole oh, I knew that was going to happen. I feel like it should be
It
banned.
drives me crazy.
But in a more quotidian sense, it was a trip I did went back east, and I was traveling with Chewy the dog, and poor guy, he shit his bed, and so I was like, oh man, and I remember on the other side, imagine the trauma of that. I remember this side, I was like, I was calling home, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna, I gotta, clean the dog up, and the missus says like, "Oh, I knew that was going to happen." I was like, "That's not helping." Well, why didn't you tell me before I got on the plane? I knew that was going to happen. Like, where does that come from? Even the audacity to say that. I knew he was going to shit his bed. How'd that work out for you? It's like, what? Of course, I guess you can have a feeling, but then the feeling is not empirical. It's kind of like, I don't know where that feeling comes from. I mean, I guess I can think, but anyway. It needs, I don't know what we do with all that. Brandon,
Hey, how's it going, y'all?
it's going great.
Good. All
All right.
right. So I I love the conversation. Sorry, first off, sorry I was late. I was at a doctor's appointment. It went longer than I thought it would, but I coming into this conversation, I really like resonate a lot with what's being said here, and I think some of the things I'm going to present are very relevant. Namely, first off, Julian, I appreciate your insights on like starting a business because I'm currently in the process of separating from IBM. My last day there is October 31st, and I'm starting a business. I'm creating an independent design studio called Quiet Loud Lab, and it's starting out well so far. I'm getting some cool part-time gigs. I'm looking at some longer-term stuff, and but it's scary, and it's a lot of uncertainty. But I'm in a very privileged position in that I basically have runway through the end of the year because of my severance and everything. So I'm excited. It's fun. Now going to what Anna was saying, what Dre was saying, and what Kemp was saying, a lot of this really resonates with me and the kind of work I'm going to show because so much of it kind of is about that interplay between the self and how and medium. And what I mean by that is like when it comes to creative acts, so much of what we do is a struggle because we don't know how to articulate ourselves. And when we think, and before I even like, I was reminded of. So I'm reading Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, the recent translation by Ken Liu, who also translated the Three Body Problem series. If y'all like that, one thing he does in this translation is play with the idea of the futility of language. And I'm going to start this out by reading a passage from it and like just a quick quote from him because I think it's very relevant. And so he's referencing chapter 4, which is a vessel from which the flow never ends, where Lao Tzu is saying Tao is a vessel from which the flow never ends, unfathomable, like the origin of all things, dulling edges, dissolving entanglements, hiding glows, fusing with terrestrial dust, it fades away, or does it? I know not from what it descends. Maybe it's older than the creator. Now, the passage itself, it can be interpreted in a million ways. And what Ken Liu wrote about this is that this chapter in particular has exemplifies the mysticism of some of Lao Tzu's writing, particularly using words like dulling edges, dissolving entanglements, hiding glows, fusing with terrestrial dust. The terms are deliberately vague, opaque, ambivalent, or confusing, and there are 1,000 ways to translate them into English, none of which would be any clearer. Lao Tzu wrote this way because he wanted to emphasize that language is ultimately a misleading guide. We think that when something is nameable, but it's real, it is real, but the name that can be spoken is not the name that endures. Conversely, when we think what cannot be spoken about, conversely, we think what cannot be spoken about does not exist, but the most important knowledge is never reducible to words. He's saying that he also goes on for a parable from Chuangzi who talks about Du Quan and his wheelwright. I'm not going to read that one, but it's basically talking about like when you build a skill over years and years and years, it's impossible to communicate what you know about that skill because so much of it has to do with your full embodied experience. It's about how you feel things. If you're a wheelwright, it's about how you touch the wood and how you understand like the interplay between yourself and the wood in order to create a wheel that is built in order for the use that it's being built for. In a talk I gave last year, maybe the year before, and this is going to be a very messy presentation in general, so I hope that I'm sure we're at a theme there already. But in a presentation I gave last year, I talked about words around "I love you" and how that's weird coming from me as a presenter, because ultimately that's the context behind the words "I love you" are different from maybe somebody else saying "I love you." Maybe the first thing that comes to mind is like a loved one, an ex, someone who's no longer here with us. Then I also talk about the painting Guernica from oh my God, I've covered this a million times and I'm blanking on the name. Picasso. And how a lot of people view this painting, and initially they'll have an idea around it, but then you learn about the history, about how it's named after the town Guernica that was bombed in World War II. And when you look at it again, you notice the tiny details around how what Picasso was trying to communicate in this painting. And this all goes. This is all going to get to a dream app that I'm designing. But the idea to start out with AI particularly is that when we think about language in this way, and when we think about concepts around like the medium is the message, ultimately like anything that we can produce as people is ultimately limited by the medium that we're producing it in, whether that's language, whether it's art, whether it's photography, whether it's dance, whether it's performance art. At the end of the day, it's a means of communicating in a way that is ultimately limited. And when we think about AI, particularly large language models, when they're trained on language and when they're trained on the patterns of language and how things go depending on their training and the parameters you set around how they generate language, it reduces language to its aesthetics. And when you think about like Picasso's horrors of war, he represents it this way with many, many different individual choices along the way. But when you ask, say, Midjourney to create a scene that's indicative of the horrors of war in the style of Pablo Picasso, it knows that skeletons are associated with horror and language. It knows that horses are associated with a war about painting that Picasso did. It knows that Cubism styles are associated with Picasso, and it knows that also other styles like Goya, you could see influences here. So it's referencing the language itself and what it's trained on. And this is ultimately like the limitation of using AI within creative mediums. It's purely just a data visualization of the bias that the AI is built on. And we as people build meaning, and we go through a creative act in order to, when we interact with anything that is AI generated. When I was at IBM, I was doing a lot of work with IBM research around the question, how might we help users form accurate mental models of generative AI and co-creative context to build effective human AI collaboration? A lot of this was focused on integration of AI within design thinking. I got to build my first paper on it about using basically back when GPT-3 was the main thing. I got it to produce what would normally look like sticky notes within design thinking contexts. And we were studying how people interacted with them. And this started out with basically just you put in the context surrounding a pursuit or a study you're doing within AI, a subject, whatever, and it would generate sticky notes that are indicative of what sticky notes within that context of a design thinking session would look like. This eventually turned into a larger prototype, and we learned a lot of really valuable lessons around how we integrate with AI. But at the end of the day, when we consider like these lessons learned around what are the limitations around creativity in general, and building out and like the artifacts of creativity that are produced as a result of internal dialogue, communication with people, collaboration, things like this, the question kind of became, how might we ensure human agency and intent when introducing artificial perspectives and bias? So when we're thinking about expanding on ideas or subjects, when we integrate AI, now we might want to use something that just takes a subject matter and produces things for us to react to, instead of use it as a means to replace certain creative functions. So within the context of design thinking, and I do also want to, I mentioned this last week, but I do know design thinking is a flawed practice. I view it in a way, more than anything, it's a means to get people to communicate about a subject and build a shared understanding around a subject, rather than replace design or as a means to build something within a day and call it done. But when we think about AI and how it integrates within co-creative environments, when we think about something like aerospace engineers tasked with designing components like landing gear doors, flaps, spoilers, we might wonder how do regulations impact their design. So when an AI can produce multiple things for us to think about, it generates discussion among people. And that's kind of the point. It gets us to think about what are the different things we can think about when we are thinking about a subject. Now, an old colleague of mine, Chris Nozzle, talked about these things as meaning machines. And I want to be clear that the difference between a meaning machine in this context and the idea that people are meaning machines is that a meaning machine is a specific tool. It's a group of signifiers randomized into a fixed grammar, read for new meaning. I like to give tarot as the example. And this is a means of semantic noodling, or just thinking about a concept or an idea behind words and symbols, in playing with those ideas and concepts represented through words and symbols. When we think about the interaction design of tarot, you shuffle a deck, you put the cards on the table, and then you read these signifiers that are randomized into a fixed grammar, how they fall on the table, the direction they're facing, et cetera, and then you build meaning out of it based on how you interact with it in regards to where your life is going, how you interpret the cards, stuff like that. And this got me thinking about, okay, well, when we consider AI as a potential means to randomize language and grammar into fixed grammar through different kinds of generative production, what do the roles of AI in creative functions and meaning making look like? So the second concept I cover here is three roles. This is the beginning of a model for how we interact with AI in order to empower creativity in people. The first is the puller. It gathers context around the subject that you're looking into. So if you're writing a story about a frog that gets lost in the woods, it can ask you questions around it, or it can take its general synthesis of data surrounding frogs and woods and that kind of context, and ask you questions to help you build out your idea of what this is. It can push ideas like the empathy map generator I showed earlier. It can push like, hey, think about it in this direction. Or it can produce things for you, which is kind of what we typically see. This is a prototype I built of a chatbot that designs itself as you discuss what you want it to look like. And you could get really fun with this stuff. I don't have controls over this, but I get it to look like a chatbot from 90s hell, which is nice. Now, I know I'm running late on time. I covered this in the last one, so I'll just kind of cover how this has gone into a design system, or a way to interpret or build designs for co-creative AI. When we think about AI and how we can build meaning from it, I am building a dream journaling app where basically you write your dream like you would in any other dream journaling app. This could be through voice, this could be through actually writing it down, and then it gathers symbols around what you have written is in your dream. So it helps you take notice to certain patterns or subjects or people or locations or beings or objects, etc. Within your dreams. It doesn't interpret them for you. It's not like a Jungian type of interpreter for dreams. It just helps you more deeply look at the content of your dreams, and it helps you notice patterns within your dreams. So within this context, it might be something like an oracle or a Japanese restaurant. But the idea is that over time, you're also able to gather information around what are the general patterns within your dreams. This could be you often are unable to complete tasks in your dreams. You're often unable to, or you're often dealing with malfunctioning objects. Or you're often dreaming about exam halls or authority figures or being unprepared, these kind of things. And it's not a means to interpret your dreams for you, but it helps you think about, oh, these are patterns within my dreams that are being noticed by this machine. What do I think about that? And we can get into the actual design and information architecture of it all, but that's the high level idea. This was also built out of just how do people interact with their dreams and use dream journals in the first place. And when we think about where AI is in here, the person writes their dream journal entry. They can either highlight sentences themselves, or the AI collects sentences with symbols, and then those captured sentences are then fed into the AI again for it to recognize symbols within the sentences. They capture the symbols, they classify them, and they generate a table of category symbols and sentences, which then the user can decide to either keep or delete. And that's where it creates the database for the larger system to bring light the patterns of their dreams over time.
Hey, Brandon, should we go to questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Yeah. I saw someone raise their hand.
Yeah, Mateus. Hey.
Oh, that was me. Nice. I'm first. Okay, great presentation. It's really interesting stuff. I'm curious though, I'm not the AI hater, but I'm the AI curmudgeon, right? So if we look at the tarot example, right? So when you have the tarot reading, you have the nominally stable cards that usually are interpreted in a particular way that is more or less consistent with the reader and with some sort of model of things, right? So in your case, the interpretations, whatever, that becomes the cards. But you have in the reading, you have the reader. You have another human who can see how can I not mess this person up? This is the fourth time you come to my reading, and you keep asking me about if you should ask that person out, or if you should leave your wife, or if you should change jobs. But I can see that there's something else. Like the reader isn't a neutral messenger. They are the filter and interpreter of you, and they are basically doing cold reading. When you lose that, the cold reading function of another human, or even the care of another human, how can the I like the idea. I like the idea of the dream notebook and the interpretations. I'm just looking at all the AI romance Reddits, all those things, and you don't have anyone who looks out for the person offering up their dreams for interpretation that you have in a tarot. So I'm curious what you've thought about this, which I'm sure you have.
Oh yeah. First off, thank you. I think it's really important to think about that. I do think when it comes to the long-term understanding of how people are affected when they interact with AI in these ways is important. I haven't dived into it as much as I'd like to, but I will say generally you can do a tarot reading on yourself. Another example of a meaning machine is also Oblique Strategies from Brian Eno. And when we think about the larger pattern, it's about, even with a person there, they are also bringing their own bias. They're bringing their own understanding and interpretation of the words, and meaning is still built in the self by whether it's them interpreting the cards themselves, or whether it's a person telling them what the cards mean. I would say the interaction with AI is actually a little more, maybe even more similar to a tarot reader telling someone what the cards mean, because of that kind of bias. And I think when we consider AI in creative contexts, it's important to use its pattern recognition, and it's important to use its ability to notice rather than interpret for that reason. I think when we replace interpretation with AI, that's where more danger comes in than noticing patterns for the person to interpret themselves. Now, I want to be like very clear. I'm also a bit of a curmudgeon with AI. I try to be very nuanced in my thinking about it. I try to not think it's like the next big thing, and I am a little worried about how even these kind of interactions can affect people. But in the current state of AI, I think this is at least one of the better ways to approach AI intervention within creative contexts. Particularly because it is creating an environment for people to create meaning in its, rather than saying, hey, here's the meaning you just ordered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, although you made a difference between interpretation and what was the other word? It was context finding, no?
Yes.
Interpretation and context or in comparison? Sorry?
Pattern recognition versus interpretation.
Right. And I would say that those are they are so similar because they're based on the same weights that what you're going to interpret is going to be based on the weights that you have, right? Regardless, as a human or as an AI.
Yeah.
This is how I interpret the world. This is how I interpret the context and the input that I have and my references from my teaching material and my weights. And these are these are my interpretations of the data, and this is my this is the related objects. This is how I interpret it. Both things are like different presentationally, but conceptually they seem very similar, I think. But anyway, I think it's a great experiment. It reminds me a bit like the book Dice Man, right? How you say you mentioned. Okay, I could really recommend it because what you're saying about that we can do a tarot reading of ourselves. Sure, but there's a really great trick, which is like if you have a binary choice to make, and you just make a coin flip, you say, okay, I'll go left or right or whatever. Usually, what happens is before the coin lands, you know what you want the result to become. So you flip the coin and go, okay, I hope it tells me to get Chinese because that's what I really want, right? You already know because somehow you know what you want. You just need a push. And tarot readings doing that for yourself is the same. I know I shouldn't, entertain that relationship or whatever. I know I shouldn't, but now the cards tell me. So it's just like it's a play. You're playing out your internal dialogue outside, right?
I totally agree. I think one big less like takeaway of this experiment is design as a means of like building that interaction between the human and AI is really important because you are able to create it's hard and it's a little muddy, but I think there are ways to create interfaces in which the output of generative AI is you can argue with it or you can disagree with it. The one big thing I try to avoid in anything I use AI in today are conversational interfaces, particularly because there's a greater chance of anthropomorphizing them. And when you present it as like, hey, here's some data, it creates an environment where you might even feel more comfortable saying like, oh, that's stupid. I'm going to ignore that. Or I don't agree with that. So within the dream journaling app, being able to dismiss or just exit out a few of the symbols that are presented because say maybe, oh, that's not important, or being able to add your own because, oh, I noticed this, but the AI missed it. I think that is the end goal here, is that just that like interplay between the dream and the self, as opposed to what is the AI able to just collect for me.
Yeah, I'll yield the floor with one short comment, I wonder if because we can't really help to add to because chat interfaces, it speaks like a human, acts like a human, speaks with like the motivations as if it was a human. We can't help but to anthropomorphize it.
Yeah.
So perhaps just if we could add a personality that is really obnoxious, or
I
speaks
like
like
that.
a high priest, or like a really stupid person with like a limited vocabulary of 100 words, like that would force the interpretation back to the human using it again. I don't know if that would work because I'm just looking at all the like people who try to put in railguards for AIs not to be misused, but people who have a tendency to read too much into it do their utmost to circumvent by prompt hacking the AI. So I'm thinking like just make it alien and stupid and people and it's better that it's a stupid god than that it's a digital human maybe. I don't know. It's an interesting experiment. I'd love to see a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I think there's an interesting also with like creating nonsensical outputs. I think there's something to be checked out there.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I just want to say, like, thank you so much for sharing. Like, you clearly know AI inside and out, and this has been one of the best, like, ways to think about using AI that I've come across other people presenting. So I just finished, well, I'm still in the middle of helping a new symbolic logic code project go to market. And I did the UI UX for the experience going the MVP. And I just want to say, like, your breakdown of like the puller pusher producer model would have saved me so many hours. Like I got there because I believe in the same thing as you, right? Like technology is there to help humans, right? Not replace them. And I got there and I was really happy, but I couldn't like label like why do I feel like this experience is the right experience to solve this problem. And if I just had that mental model, I would have been able to like articulate it so much clearer, faster. So I just want to say thank you for sharing that. Like, it really, really helped me. And like already, because like I would hand off, the wires and anything that like I was having like couldn't turn around myself in time. I'd hand back to the CEO for him to finish off, and then he would go off and finish it. And he's like, "Oh, I added this or did this," and like he doesn't get the like he's really deep in the symbolic logic code, like the backends, right? And he just would go off on these tangents, and I was trying to explain to him like why what he did with the MVP is going in the wrong direction, right? And so like and so this is really going to help me kind of like uh get him aligned on that. So I just wanted to say like thank you so much for sharing that. Um just on this, I think chat interfaces, just to riff off what you and Tays were talking about, are really interesting because you are chatting with a robot with an algorithm that is designed to chat with you a certain way. And it's really cool to, you get into like the open source models where you can train it to do whatever you want. And so you don't have to have that helpful tone there, right? You can do something very different. And one of the things that I believe in really strongly is like uh augmenting a chat display with a sort of taxonomy display or a traditional form display where it's like you're chatting with it but like you're trying to like by having a traditional form or other like visual symbols like groupings of relevant information, all this stuff, it helps the user understand like, well, these are the things I'm supposed like this is what I'm trying to talk about. So rather than being like totally open-ended, that it helps the human understand the goal of the conversation. And similar to rather than just being a producer, it's like a puller, right? Like the AI is trying to pull out information from the user, and as the AI is pulling out the information from the user, you're simultaneously displaying to the user like, well, this is the information that I pulled from you. And then it goes to your quote of like you can disagree with what the AI is trying to do, right? So it gives the user the ability to like, no, you got that wrong, right? Like, I see you like thinking I'm thinking this, but no, right? Like, that's not what I want, right? And I think that this space is so cool to explore. And anyway, I just wanted to say like thank you for you know talking about this. I really want to talk to you more later. I
Yeah.
won't for the whole group.
Yeah, please connect with me after this. I think there's a lot more to be said here. And I'm not going to cover these, but I'll give you 3 screens to just take screenshots of. And also there's a Medium article I wrote that covers a lot of these ideas in more detail as well. But these are questions to ask when identifying modeling creative action. These are how you map the data around creative contexts. And this is how you assign AI and human tasks and system tasks in order to build the interplay around there. It's also covered in the article, but if you want to take screenshots real quick, I think these are also really useful for designers. And thank you so much for your kind words. This has been a crazy pursuit. And I agree. I like your comments around building a taxonomy as you're interacting with an AI so that you can dismiss what it's understanding, quote unquote, of what you're studying or viewing contextually, whether it's going in the right direction or not. I think that's a really good addition here. Thank you.
Great stuff, man. I'm really glad that I kind of subtly goaded you to share it.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So I don't want to be too extensive, but the thing that kind of comes to mind in this context that might be worth not watching the Criterion edition because it's just ridiculously long, is Van Vender's Until the End of the World, which is which as a through line, it's totally goofy and funny, and it's got amazing production design. I'm super jealous of the production design for it, but it's around a kind of dream interpretation machine, but it doesn't over index on the machine, which is beautiful. It doesn't fetishize the technology so much as questions about what the experience would be, and both. And there was a whole thing. It was I remember reading, maybe it was in Cinefex decades ago, that there was Sony was involved in the production. So there was technology that was just coming to market, and they called it HD TV. What is that? So a lot of the stuff um is part of it is that thing of oh, we're going to show you what the future might look like. Handy cams feature in it, video telephones feature in it, but there and these beautiful AIs. I mean, sorry, not yeah, I guess they are AI interfaces that it's almost I wish that they went down. They're all character based, searching. There's a bear searching, and the bear's kind of running through the woods searching. All that kind of stuff uh, voice. There's one author in it,
Mm.
played by Sam Neill. He's writing a book throughout it, sort of document. He's like the voice of the auteur in the film. Um, anyway, it might be worth watching. It came up in another context. Someone was, I think, I was talking to Corinne Fury and that stuff, and I was actually surprised. I think maybe not surprised, but it's it. I don't think the film did all that well because it was Wim Wenders, and he's like, no, the true edition is 4.5 hours long. Otherwise, you're watching trash. They ruined my film. You watch a 4 hour one, and you're just like, dude.
I will definitely check this out. I love and I'm sorry, it's Van Vender's Interior of the World.
Until the End of the World.
Until the End of the World. Got it.
Yeah. Oh, and it's got this. Oh, yeah, it's got this kind of apocalyptic, but subtly apocalyptic element to it. But again, that isn't over. It's not like you're watching, cities get destroyed or zombies awakening or something like that. It's you're not seeing that, which is kind of beautiful in a way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'll definitely check.
GPS is in it, talking GPS.
Oh, cool.
And this is all way before that stuff.
Yeah. Wow, 1991.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'll check it out. That sounds super interesting. I feel like there's so much fiction out there that covers vague ideas around this. And I mean, it makes sense when in creativity. I feel like one of the largest, if not the largest, struggles is how do we articulate our internal being, which we can't. It's it's a flaw of like living in a physical world, I think. And not in when I say flaw, I mean I'm not even criticizing it. I think it's also a very beautiful part of like living. But it's interesting to think about the interplay and how people like think about the interplay.
Nice. So definitely, let's keep us in the loop. It's okay to come back again. Totally.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Cool. Jed, do you wanna just share what the heck you've been up to? Because you sent me those images and I was like, dude.
Okay. Um, sure. I just wanted to, from what Brendan was saying there. Yeah, I mean, I thought of a bunch of things just listening and but in general, like I was just thinking, like, how do I really, you know, interface with the AIs and what's up with my process a bit without, getting too into the weeds with what I'm thinking about exactly. But articulation, I think, is like, how do I kind of use it like, I think I'm always like giving it context and then asking it to articulate it in a way that helps me articulate right in general afterwards. So that's a big one for me of like how I sort of collaborate with the tools or with the AIs, not even tools, just I think about them more as like creative kind of collaborators.
Yeah.
So I think that's like, and I don't dive too deep into the complexity of the system. It's more like what are some simple rule sets? That's just kind of how I think that I could, use to get further down the thought process, I suppose. So yeah, articulation is a big one. Like how, and then I think overall, in the back of my head, I'm like, it's learning more about me and remembering more about the conversations we're having, whether it's in the channels or just in particular in the chat. And then I have like aha moments of like it's connecting dots for me too that maybe I wasn't thinking about. And so I think those are the big ones for me is like uh, the more I use it, in theory, I feel like the more it can connect dots that I wouldn't necessarily thought about in my thinking. So
If I
that's
can jump on that real quick.
yeah,
Yes. And I think a big thing here is that when it brings to light things you are already thinking about, a big struggle with creativity is articulating things that maybe you know, but you haven't had a chance to articulate yet. And when it brings that like almost like gives you permission to like say, oh yeah, let me expand on this idea. I think that helps a lot with creative like output of people.
yeah. So those are my positives, I suppose, towards uh, being involved with whichever AIs these are on a daily basis at this point. So
Yeah.
that's sort of where I think that's where I really enjoy the creative process and the furthering of what I'm up to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Then Randall, I'm just kind of curious what your what's going on with your interface over there. I feel like you're gesturing. You got a gesture interface going.
Oh no, sorry. I was just trying to do some urgent technical support
Gotcha.
at work.
Yeah, it's a fun video to watch from this end.
Brenda's also at work.
Yeah. Um, all right. Let's see. I don't know where. I don't know how far back I should go, Julian. I mean, I do. I'm kind of in the middle of in a scramble mode to get things done this week. So, uh, I put some images in the chat because it had been a while, and um, I don't. I mean, I kind of have like a presentation that I was really more for me in the process of what's been going on for the past month with like building out this installation thing. I mean, I could just kind of like go through it quickly, I suppose. It's just more like giving context and notes and stuff. Is that okay to do? Or should I just talk about it? What do you think?
Well, show is always fun because you're a visual guy.
Yeah, okay. Let's try this. All right. share. Okay, so let me just move this a little bit for myself. So this is all right. So I guess Android's Dream.ai is something people don't know. Something Julian and I, Dre, worked on kind of like probably started it like close to 2 years ago now. And it was a book. It was some trading cards. It had to do with rewriting Android's Dream using AI, early days with GPT, and then image generation was based on early Mid-Journey stuff. And then fast forwarding, let's see, I started building electric sheep opposed to just prompting them. And then a lot of this is in the context of open source hardware, and then in particular in sort of crypto mining, Bitcoin mining in particular. And so basically I started creating physical sheep using open source hardware that would that were going along with ideas in the home mining community. And so this is just sort of a conceptual framework here. Black Sheep turns open source Bitcoin miners like BitX and NerdXQs. These are just open source hardware platforms into sculptural, functional artifacts. Each piece is a living node. It mines, it signals, and it carries cultural meaning. And then this is a few ways of kind of saying the same thing. But basically, it's a decentralized herd of black sheep miners that redirect hash power to mine Satoshis for inscribing art and experimentation. Now, there's a lot of nuance here, but basically, people create art on Bitcoin, Satoshis being the smallest form of fraction of a Bitcoin, and you're basically inscribing digital content onto a fraction of a Bitcoin, and that's how it exists in the world. And so you can mine either fractions of a Bitcoin, or alternatively, you can route hash power to a solo pool for maximum rewards. And what that means is that you take a little piece of open source hardware that sits in your house, and you aim it at a mining pool, and you have a chance of winning the lottery. Lottery meaning that you won the block reward. Block reward is it's a consensus mechanism that happens every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes or so, you have a chance of winning 3.12 Bitcoin. So that's sort of the fun of it in a way for people, is to dive into what these things are, set them up in their homes, and then they kind of have this lottery chance of like winning a reward in some ways. And then they're kind of learning about how it all works. Another way of saying a similar thing, there are equal parts hardware hack, decentralized art foundry, and a lottery ticket, all wrapped into one open source ethos. So this is just showing the one on the left would be what the artifacts sort of look like, the sculptures, the physical form. The art in a sense is those are some of those images that came from the Android's Dream project with the cards, where they're prompted in Mid-Journey, and then this is just showing a representation of a lottery mining pool, and so your hardware is sort of on that network. And then I kind of conceived and showed this work back in May in Vegas. This is sort of what they looked like. They kind of come in a Pelican style case, and they open up and they display these little sheep miners that are running on the network in real time. This was sort of a build out of what it was like in a kind of a dome that was inflatable, and then they kind of sat around in a circle around a big digital screen. And then on the digital screen, we made like a visualization of all the miners in real time as sort of sheep running around in space, sort of trying to get to a block reward, which is what's in the center, that little orange dot. there kind of represents that. So there was sort of a real-time visual going of these sheep miners sitting in a space, and then showing what they looked like sort of in a decentralized network. And then here's a bigger detail of what that looked like. So like that arrow is kind of pointing to one of these animated sheeps on the screen there. And so this was sort of like an evolving sort of digital representation of the network happening in real time. And then we did like a sort of a workshop with how to set up some of this hardware, and I did that with a few people that are sort of in the space there. And then let's see, yeah, these were the ones that were there. Okay, and then yeah, what I'm preparing for now is sort of the next iteration of it in Hong Kong. This is happening on, I think I leave on the 25th of August, so soon. This was sort of like an art gallery inside the context of this conference, and this is sort of the space. There's a huge kind of digital display, and so taking over part of that. And then this is sort of where it went to is the idea of immersion mining, where I'm taking these small sculptures and putting them into a cooling liquid, dielectric immersion cooling fluid. And then the representation of them is that one on the right. And Randall had given me back sort of a running sheep that was more in liquid form. So it seemed to kind of all come together at an interesting point of a visual. And then these are kind of like my notes. Let's see. This was sort of some mock-ups of what they might look like. The symbol with the shell stuff is basically because they create a dielectric fluid that's for this stuff. And it was sort of in the idea of building a larger installation, these things with them involved. And then these are images of the sheep that wanted to be possibly represented as physical prints. So that was some of them laid out. And then riffing on sort of where things were, but using brands and branding that dealt with this particular audience, let's say. And those are some examples of that. And then potential layout of how things might look. And then this is, I think, actually how it's going to come together for this thing. It's like a 10 by 20 sort of space where there's a wall, there's information about it. And then there's 3 miners set up. The 2 on the outside would be working towards mining sats for, inscribing and experimenting with new digital art. And the center one would be mining for the lottery, and it's in a submerging cooling fluid. And these were some other just ideas how it might lay out. Kind of talked about that. It's kind of a living herd forming a proof of work. And then here's sort of the idea of what the large display might have or will have. And so it's basically just the one sheep. And then this is Randall had gotten it moving. I don't know if it will play here or not. But anyways, it has motion that kind of runs in an interesting way. And so they'll each be represented. It won't be live for this event, but they'll basically be sort of running from one side to the other, and they'll be, visualizing the network. And they kind of will look like this. And the scale will be larger than life kind of thing, kind of like that. And then there's kind of like stock ticker info above about different things about how the how the network's performing. And so that's sort of, I think it. Yeah, and it references, so if it wasn't clear at all, if you're not familiar, the black sheep, the way that it's basically on reference to or a nod to like Damien Hirst's like Departure from Stillness, which is these black sheeps in vitrines of formaldehyde. And so this is sort of speaking on that, or it's referring to that conceptually, but it's sort of act of what it's doing is pretty different. And that was other sort of renderings of what it might look like in the future involving shell and other, ideas of how it would come together. And then this was just sort of a thing on how to get shell involved because they have a presence in these sort of environments at these conferences and things. So I think that's it. That's what I got. Is that, yeah.
Height. Sandra.
Yeah, Jed, like, I've said it like 1,000 times, like this is better than most things I see at galleries. You need to, there must be someone on here that can help you get this in somewhere. It's fucking beautiful.
Thank you.
And the thing that, apart from its beauty as an aesthetic object, it's a living thing, right? Like it's mining. And I could just imagine like the press coverage when it hits, like if it ever hits the lottery and I don't know, you build a little thing that spits out monopoly money in the amount, or maybe real money or a giant novelty check or something. But it's just a beautiful thing, and I don't have to say more. The actual question I wanted to ask you is, like, it looks like if I'm seeing this correctly, you immerse it. Can it be like immersed, like actually in a liquid?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
How does
actually
that happen? Amazing.
process of testing last minute right now.
Yeah.
In the chat, which maybe you commented on yesterday, if you scroll up a few images, there's one there, and when it's sitting in
the Discord
oil.
Discord
Yeah,
chat.
sorry, in the Discord, in the channel, there's a little
Yeah, I saw it, but I didn't know if I could trust my lying eyes, So
yeah,
it's actually in a liquid. Amazing.
The
yeah.
thing, Jed, that you did, I don't know if you mentioned, is that its shell actually makes a fluid specifically for that, for industrial use in Bitcoin, and, in blockchain mining.
Yeah, like industrial scale mining.
Yeah. So it's an actual industrial material that it would be awesome. Jed, weren't you, when I was at the studio a few weeks ago, you were like trying to figure out how you could get 50-gallon barrels.
Yeah, I mean that I don't need that today, so I'm still trying to figure that out.
You do need it. It
but
needs to be part of the installation.
Well, yeah, what I ended up doing was visiting some places that sell drums of 55 gallons around LA because we happen to have them. And I ended up with basically for purposes of this, I'm testing and displaying for a few days pure mineral oil, like a high grade mineral oil that's clear that serves the same function more or less. It's not quite tuned for the hardware, but it will work fine. And so that's what I'm testing now. So it's just like food grade oil, mineral oil that picture is of, that they're submerged in. And
I'm wanting to see like the sci-fi bubbles percolating from the bottom.
yeah. Well, the funny thing is that I thought I was going to have to I still might. The oil heats up technically, right, over time when you're running this equipment in there. And so I have to keep the temperatures at a certain level. And yesterday they're exceeding that level, and basically the things shut down to protect themselves. And so I'm solving for that right now still. So it's about the volume and how much power is running in there. And then further down the road of solving, there's bubbling involved, right? Where you're kind of doing that. I'm hoping not to get there because it involves more sort of equipment that I don't want to set up right now and bring with me to Hong Kong next week. I don't think I have time for that. But I think just some cooling fans up above and the size of the vitrine and how much wattage I'm running in it is, I'm at the point now where it's like sort of a science where it's like the aesthetic is sort of secondary and I'm just needing it to work for, or not, maybe I'll just turn it off. But the idea is to have it working there at the scale, but it's also just leading up to like what it takes to um, make more of them after this one. So this is kind of like phase one of it. Seems like it's coming together. Yeah.
I'm glad that the animation rig is working. Is the video on the back of it, is that going to be live rendered sheep that are able to speed up and slow down, or have you baked out like movies that you're going to be playing and overlaying and stuff?
Yeah, because of, well, the original one was live.
Uh,
In theory, you could plug in the animated one to that setup, but this is a different visual. And it won't be live because there's only 3 sheep on the network that will be there.
yeah.
And we want to have more. And so it will be an animation of a simulated one. And I haven't seen it yet myself because my friend Joel is just working on that aspect. I basically passed along your files to him and we talked about what things were happening, and I'm just sort of we'll go back and forth in it probably the next couple of days, but we haven't yet. And then I was going to share it. I just have nothing to share yet.
Yeah, cool. No, that's exciting. Yeah, thinking about how much you've been able to get out of how little work uh makes me think about what you might be able to get out of sort of, for example, dynamically skinning different sort of things coming out of Meshi or whatever. Like, I don't know, Dre, do you know if there's anything that does auto skinning uh based on sort of models like that, like auto,
Like
because
UV maps?
no skinning
Oh, skinning.
for rig like armature scanning.
Oh, armature, like inverse kinematics, or
Well, like
not rigging.
the skin, yeah, the rigging and the skin weights from a
Oh,
generated mesh.
oh yeah. No, I don't. I think there's some rigging stuff, and there's some skinning in the sense of like a UV map, but I don't know about the skinning that you're talking about.
Right. I mean, I don't know how many people are using like a headless blender, but you can use like you could use like Rigify. No, it's just, yeah, in terms of what if you were to invest in like some real creative technologists to build for you, you'd be able to get out of a sort of a conceptual frame of reference like this. It's pretty exciting. But yeah, like I'd love to see what comes out of this and what you see as your sort of greatest desires and needs of what the whole sort of set of resources should do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's we'll see how this turns out.
I
Yeah,
just realized
spark a
I'm
lot
gonna
of, yeah.
I'm gonna connect everything right now. I just had a connection moment. So Brandon, the whole idea was, we started out um fucking with PK Dick's Android's Dream of Electric Sheep to be like to do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. We changed it to Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. Yeah.
They
That was the conceit. They do. And so now you got your dream thing going on. And here's the other connection. The last time, or maybe the time before last, I was visiting Jed's studio. He had this big 3-ring binder that included, it was a scrapbook of even like stuff that we had done, what the fuck, 15, 20 years ago. And I was like, oh man. And I was like, oh, I'm doing scrapbooks too. So
Yeah.
I'm connecting everything. Maybe I didn't do that very well. Mateus.
Yeah, I was curious, like two meta things. One, how much you mentioned the oil or whatever heating up. I was curious how much actual power they are using, and but secondary, it would be interesting to see a calculator statistically how long time before your art piece is valued as much as what Hearst stuff is selling for, right? So if you're doing this as a riff on his, well, the shark and the sheep and all that, so how much time before you can sell one of these for as much as he charged for his rotten shark or the sheep? That would
Right.
be, but that's just the art wonk in me curious.
Yeah. Yeah, to answer the first part, this first, let's call it, proof of concept slash being installed as a finished piece. It's just running at about 85 watts in there, and I'm putting it into a 10-gallon vitrine. So it's like, it's not huge, but it's on a podium, like kind of like those renderings would be. It's probably it probably sits like, 5 feet tall and 2 feet by 2 feet by 5 feet.
You can multiply it like create like a wall like you showed, and it should sell for millions. That's what I think.
Yeah, it's definitely conceptually of just a decentralized network perspective and putting more and more of these sheep miners or open source home mining equipment on the network. It's meant to be, that's the whole idea, is we need more and more of these around. So
And it may generate money. So it may be the first art project that ever pays you back.
yeah, I did make an earlier iteration that mined Ethereum like 5, 6 years ago, and I called it the ROI sheep. And it did do it. It took it like 2 years, and then I did it. So
Yeah, like you're onto something huge here, dude. Your
thank you.
humility is extraordinary. Yeah.
Just need help getting it
Okay.
out on a market
Two
myself.
two 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 follow-up things then. The like 20 years ago or something, there's I think it's a German group called Übermorgen. They did a project called Google Will Eat Itself, where they were basically gaming the AdWord. They spammed the web with fake sites, which plugged in AdWord, AdSense ads, and all the money that they made, they automatically bought Google stock for it. So the whole project became like Google
Yeah.
will eat itself. The idea being that they will sooner or later take over all of Google, which I thought was fun. Speaking of,
Yeah.
as a related reference, but also another, and this isn't the suggestion for where you want to take the work, but if you want to use the metaphor instead of doing it as a comment on art, doing it as a comment on like homesteading and rearing sheep and stuff. For the cooling problem, look at how people who moonshiners, how they use reflux spirals to cool when they're doing moonshine. That, I
Right.
mean, aesthetically, it looks really nice. A lot of copper piping
Yeah.
and water pumps and all that. That could look also nice, but it also visualizes the energy in and out, right? The inefficiency of the silicon that you need to actually cool it. You can't use all of the energy in for calculations, because so much of it goes out as heat, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. There's I love sort of those sort of systems in general. Yeah, this aesthetic was sort of referencing those ones that Hearst did in a way. But there's interesting, one of the kind of one of the things that happens within this sort of weird home mining sort of thing is there's a lot of talk about using all the excess heat for heating in general. And so I'll try and find it and maybe put it in the Discord, but there's one that was using immersion cooling miners. a more sophisticated system that was, this is a passive one. This would be more of an active one where it has a lot of pumping and whatever. And but generally speaking, what it did is it took the excess heat and used it in a water heater to do radiant floor heating in the house. So that was sort of the whole kind of conceptual concept, is that it was it turned off how the water heater would normally heat the home, and it just ran it all based on running all the mining operation, and then there's residual back that you're earning, and at the end of the day, it's like it's saving you, or it's making you like $100 a day running the thing, opposed to spending the opposite. Yeah, I think it's an interesting place where home mining is trying to find a value structure that people will adopt. And at the end of the day, if your water heater could be producing you fractions of a Bitcoin and costing you nothing, then that's sort of like a nice story for people to be like, yeah, of course I want my water heater to be attached to this decentralized network, kind of thing.
With the liquid cooling that like a dielectric cooling fluid does, one of the things that, like, it should help with cooling rather than overheating, but what you need is circulation, and then to be able to have heat transfer out of that body of fluid. So yeah, to the point of like the piping and the other things, and this, or a circulation, like you could do something. You may be out of time, but something to think about is the fact that, like, if you can actually push that fluid around, get it through some thinner pipes, other things like that, then that is what you're supposed to do. Because it's not just that the heating disappears, that like the heat doesn't disappear, it gets transferred into the fluid. It gets transferred into the fluid very efficiently, but then you need to get it out. So you can use that both as a sort of a technical constraint on the system, but also as a really interesting aesthetic thing. So like I was just looking around, like shape dips are not that interesting visually, but if there are other like agricultural motifs, or like even something like a water wheel, except with the cooling fluid sort of splashing it around, it's going to dissipate some of the heat. There could be some really interesting things to play with, in order to make sure that you're achieving that without overheating the sheep that are immersed in it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I just feel like I'm out of time for a
Yeah.
lot for a lot of things at the moment. Basically I don't know if I said it, what I'm hoping to, so basically the top of the vitrine's open. There is a small fan that just sort of circulates, that's attached to the sheep. So the fluid is moving a little bit. And then so in theory it's there's a little bit of evaporation, and it's not a closed like environment where the heat can't escape through the top of the vitrine. So I'm counting on that as part of it. And then I'm gonna put in basically some cooling fans just on top, like not submerged, but just sort of hidden above, that will help perhaps with a variable speed thing. So that's kind of, hopefully that's my backup of like if it is overheating. And also I think calculated wise, I may, even if that falls short, I think it will take maybe roughly 8 hours to get to a point of temperature where the thing wants to like protect itself and shut down. So perhaps I just turn it on in the morning and turn it off at night. Anyways, that's for next week, right? That's my thinking for next week. But beyond that, yeah, I would love to get into more elaborate systems that do all this stuff. It'd be cool to see them. Yeah,
Good stuff, man.
thanks.
Yeah. You've always been on to things.
Onto something here. I gotta just gotta keep it going, I guess.
Definitely. Definitely. So can maybe we got time, we can I can come by before you head out, just to.
Oh yeah, I mean I'm primarily just here trying to get this wrapped up by I think I leave I leave next Sunday, not this Sunday, but the one after. So yeah, just let me know when's good.
Yeah. Grab a meatloaf sandwich from Bub's.
Yeah, it's always a good one.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone.
Yeah.
That was a good session.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah. And we'll see you all in the Discord and
Okay.
or here next week.
Enjoy the week and all.
Take care, everyone.
Do you have a
See ya.
link to the Discord? I feel like I missed that somewhere.
Yeah, hit me up. Just
Will do.
email. It's all
Cool.
screwed up.
Awesome.
All right, you guys. See ya.
All right.